I knew something was wrong the moment my own son looked at me like I was a stranger. It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind where sunlight settles gently across the living room carpet and the house carries that faint scent of coffee and lemon cleaner. My son Daniel stood by the kitchen counter, arms folded across his chest, while his wife Melissa sat beside him wearing that soft, sympathetic expression she had perfected over the years. The kind of look people give when they're talking about someone fragile, someone unstable. Mom, Daniel said carefully, choosing every word before it left his mouth. Melissa told me what happened this morning. I remember gripping the back of a chair to steady myself. What happened? I asked. Melissa lowered her eyes and even sighed a little, as if the conversation pained her. You forgot again, she said gently. You accused me of hiding your medication. The room suddenly felt smaller. I never said that, I replied. Said that, Daniel's face tightened. Not angry, exactly, but concerned. And somehow that was worse. Melissa reached out and rested a hand on his arm, her fingers moving slowly and reassuringly. It's okay, she said softly. Your mom doesn't mean it. She just gets confused sometimes. Confused? The word hung in the air like smoke. I opened my mouth to protest, but Daniel had already looked away from me. He rubbed his forehead like a man carrying too many worries and not enough sleep. Mom, he said quietly, maybe we should talk about seeing a doctor again. That was the moment something inside me shifted because I realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a story. And somehow Melissa had convinced my own son that I was the problem. 3 years earlier, my life had been simple in that peaceful way that often comes with age. I lived in a two-story house in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. The same house where Daniel had grown up, the same house where my late husband Robert had planted the maple tree that now stretched tall enough to shade half the backyard. The mornings were peaceful. I woke early, usually around 6. I'd brew coffee in the old stainless steel pot Robert had insisted on keeping, even after the handle cracked. Then I'd sit at the kitchen table with the newspaper and listen to the neighborhood wake up. The distant hum of a lawnmower, the soft barking of Mrs. Harper's golden retriever next door, the familiar creak of the floorboards when I walked down the hallway. There was comfort in routine, and I was happy. Daniel visited often in those days. He had always been a good son, kind, thoughtful, a little quiet like his father. When he first introduced me to Melissa, he looked nervous in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager asking for the car keys. Mom, he said one evening at the door, this is Melissa. She was beautiful in a polished, effortless way. Dark hair, bright smile, and the kind of confident posture that suggested she always knew exactly what to say. She brought a bottle of wine and complimented my garden within the first 10 minutes. I can tell you put love into this house, she said warmly, touching the edge of the dining table like it was something delicate. At the time, I believed her. And for a while, things truly were good. After they married, Melissa and Daniel moved into the house with me. It had been Daniel's idea. You shouldn't live alone, he told me. Besides, the place is too big for just one person. I didn't mind the company. The house felt lively again with two more voices echoing down the hallways. Melissa liked to cook elaborate dinners on weekends, filling the kitchen with the smell of garlic and roasted vegetables. Daniel handled the yard work, humming quietly while he trimmed the hedges Robert had planted years earlier. At night, we sometimes watched television together in the living room. Normal family life. At least that's what I thought it was. The first strange thing happened about 6 months after they moved in. I woke up one morning and couldn't find my car keys. I searched everywhere. My purse, the kitchen counter, the little wooden bowl by the front door where I always kept them. Nothing. Melissa found them later that afternoon. They were in the freezer, she said, holding them up with a puzzled smile. The freezer? I laughed nervously. Why on earth would I put them there? Melissa shrugged lightly. Maybe you were distracted. Daniel chuckled from the couch. Mom's always been a little forgetful. We all laughed, but something about it lingered in the back of my mind. I knew my habits. After 62 years of living with myself, you get pretty familiar with the rhythms of your own behavior. And putting car keys in the freezer was not one of them. Still, I let it go. People forget things. Weeks passed and life continued until the second incident. I remember it clearly because it happened during breakfast. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast that morning. Melissa had been experimenting with a new toaster she bought online, and the thing had a habit of turning bread into charcoal. I was pouring orange juice when she suddenly frowned at me. Linda, she said gently, did you move my purse last night? I shook my head. No. Well, she said slowly, I found it in the garage this morning. The garage? I asked, confused. Daniel looked up from his phone. Mom, did you maybe grab it by mistake? I wouldn't take someone else's purse, I said. Melissa smiled that same patient smile. It's okay, she said softly. That word again, okay, as if nothing was wrong. But that was the day I started noticing something else. Every time something strange happened, Melissa was the one who discovered it. And every time she told the story, it sounded slightly different from what I remembered. At first, I convinced myself it was coincidence. But deep down, a quiet unease had begun to settle in my chest, like the faint ticking of a clock in a silent room. And I had no idea yet that Melissa had already started telling everyone in our family a very specific story about me. A story where I was slowly losing my mind, and she was the one trying to take care of me. The first time I realized Melissa might be saying things about me behind my back was during a phone call with my sister, Carol. Carol and I spoke every Wednesday evening. It had been our habit for years, long before Daniel grew up, long before Robert passed away. She lived 2 states away in Kentucky, and those weekly calls were our way of keeping the distance from feeling too wide. That evening, I was standing in the kitchen with the cordless phone pressed between my ear and shoulder while I washed a few dinner plates. Carol's voice sounded slightly hesitant. Linda, can I ask you something? Of course, and I said, drying my hands with a dish towel. Well, she paused. Melissa mentioned you've been having some memory issues lately? I stopped moving. Memory issues? Yes, Carol said gently. She said you sometimes forget where you put things and get upset when people try to help. For a moment, I stared at the window above the sink. Outside, the maple tree Robert planted swayed quietly in the evening breeze. I forget small things sometimes, I admitted. But who doesn't? Carol hesitated again. She also said you accused her of stealing your jewelry. My stomach dropped. I never accused her of that. That's just what she told me, Carol said quickly. I'm sure it was a misunderstanding. I forced a small laugh, though it felt hollow. Yes, I said slowly. A misunderstanding. After we hung up, I stood there for a long time with the silent phone still in my hand. Melissa had never mentioned that conversation to me. Not once. That night at dinner, I watched her more carefully than usual. She moved around the kitchen with her usual grace, setting plates on the table, brushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. Her voice sounded calm as she asked Daniel about his workday. To anyone else, she looked like the perfect daughter-in-law, attentive, kind, patient. But now I couldn't stop noticing the small things. The way she sometimes studied me when she thought I wasn't looking. The way she answered questions about me when other people were around, as if she knew my story better than I did. A few weeks later, the incidents became harder to ignore. One evening, I went upstairs to get ready for bed and discovered my bedroom dresser drawers were slightly open. Not wide, just enough to notice. I closed them and didn't think much of it until the next morning when Melissa came into the kitchen holding my old pearl necklace. Linda, she said softly, were you looking for this yesterday? It was in the laundry room sink. The sink? I blinked. Daniel glanced up from his cereal. Mom, you really don't remember putting it there? I never touched it, I said. Melissa tilted her head with that same gentle concern. Well, maybe you meant to put it somewhere else and forgot. Daniel sighed quietly. Mom, this is exactly what we've been talking about. Something inside me tightened. What do you mean? He set his spoon down. Melissa says you've been misplacing things a lot lately. I looked at her. She met my eyes with the same calm expression she always wore, like a nurse comforting a difficult patient. I'm just worried about you, she said softly. Worried? The word sat heavily between us. Over the next month, more small incidents happened. My reading glasses disappeared and later turned up inside a kitchen cabinet. A bag of groceries I clearly remembered placing on the counter was found in the laundry room. Once Melissa even claimed she found my wallet in the backyard flower bed. Every time something appeared in a strange place, she was the one who discovered it. Every time she spoke about it gently, kindly, and always in front of Daniel. At first, I tried to defend myself. I didn't do that. I would remember. That doesn't make sense. But the more I protested, the more worried Daniel looked. One evening, he sat me down at the kitchen table. "Mom," he said carefully, "I think we should schedule another doctor's appointment. I'm not sick." "It's not about being sick," he said. "Sometimes memory changes with age." "I'm 62, Daniel," I replied. "Not 90." Melissa stood quietly by the sink, drying dishes while we talked. "I just want everyone to feel safe," she said softly. "Safe?" As if I was somehow dangerous. That was when I started questioning myself. Late at night, lying awake in bed, I would replay the day in my mind. Did I move those things? Could I have forgotten? A terrible thought began creeping into my mind. What if Melissa was right? What if something really was wrong with me? But there were moments that didn't add up. Like the afternoon, I clearly remembered leaving my purse on the dining room chair before going upstairs to take a shower. When I came back down, it was gone. I searched the entire house before Melissa suddenly appeared from the hallway holding it. "Oh," she said with mild surprise. "It was in the basement." "The basement?" I asked. "Yes," she said. Daniel looked at me with quiet concern, and suddenly I felt something worse than anger. I felt doubt, not in Melissa, but in myself. Days later, I overheard something that changed everything. I was walking down the hallway when I heard Melissa's voice in the living room. She was on the phone. I stopped when I heard my name. "She's getting worse," Melissa said quietly. There was a pause while the other person spoke. "I know," she continued, "but Daniel doesn't want to believe it yet." Another pause. "I just don't think she can live alone much longer." My heart began to pound because I wasn't living alone. I was standing right there in the house she was talking about, and suddenly I understood something that made my blood run cold. Melissa wasn't just telling stories about my forgetfulness, she was building a case, slowly, carefully, patiently. A story where I was losing control of my mind, and she was the responsible one trying to help. But if that story became believable enough, I had a terrible feeling about what might come next. And at the time, I had no idea how far Melissa was willing to go to make sure everyone believed her version of the truth. The night I overheard Melissa on the phone, I didn't confront her. Not immediately. Instead, I stood quietly in the hallway, my heart beating so loudly I was certain she would hear it through the wall. "She's getting worse," Melissa had said. Those words echoed in my mind long after the call ended. I slipped back to my bedroom without making a sound. The hallway floorboards creaked softly beneath my feet, a sound I had known for decades. Normally, it was comforting, part of the house's familiar voice. But that night, it felt like the house itself was warning me something was wrong, very wrong. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, staring at the framed photograph on my nightstand. It was one of my favorites. Daniel, at 12 years old, standing in the backyard beside Robert while they built a crooked wooden birdhouse. Robert had always been patient with him. "Measure twice, cut once," he used to say. Back then, Daniel trusted my judgment the way children trust their parents without question. Now he looked at me like I might forget my own name. And Melissa had something to do with that. Still, I tried to be rational. Maybe she really believed I was struggling. Maybe the strange things happening around the house were coincidences. But deep down, a quiet voice inside me whispered something else. Coincidences didn't happen this often. The next morning, I paid closer attention. Melissa was making pancakes in the kitchen when I came downstairs. The sweet smell of syrup filled the air, mixing with the soft sizzling of butter in the pan. "Good morning," she said warmly. Her smile looked exactly the same as always. If she had been talking about me behind my back just hours earlier, she gave no sign of it. "Morning," I replied carefully. Daniel sat at the table scrolling through his phone. I poured myself coffee and took my usual seat across from him. Everything felt normal. Too normal. Melissa set a plate of pancakes in front of Daniel and then one in front of me. Eat while they're hot, she said. I noticed something then. Her eyes flicked briefly toward the small shelf by the refrigerator where we kept our keys and wallets. Just for a second, but it was enough. Because when I looked over there myself, my wallet wasn't there. I'd placed it there the night before, I was sure of it. I stood up slowly and walked to the shelf. Nothing. Daniel looked up. Something wrong, Mom. My wallet isn't here. Melissa frowned sympathetically. Oh no, she said. Not again. Again? That word carried a quiet accusation. I left it right here, I insisted. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Mom. But Melissa stepped forward gently. Let's just look for it, she said in a soothing tone. For the next 10 minutes, we searched the kitchen and living room. Melissa checked the couch cushions. Daniel looked under the dining table. Finally, Melissa disappeared into the hallway. A moment later, she returned, holding my wallet. It was in the linen closet, she said softly. The linen closet? My chest tightened. I didn't put it there. Daniel sighed. Mom, maybe you just forgot. I didn't forget. The words came out sharper than I intended. Melissa raised her hands calmly. It's okay, she said. Nobody's blaming you. But that was exactly what was happening. I could see it in Daniel's eyes. The quiet worry, the cautious patience people use when they think someone is fragile. And for the first time, I felt something stronger than confusion. I felt anger because I knew something they didn't. I knew my own mind. Later that afternoon, I went into the laundry room to fold some towels. The house was quiet. Daniel had gone to work and Melissa was upstairs. As I reached for a towel, something caught my attention. The back door was slightly open, just an inch. A thin line of sunlight cut across the tile floor. I frowned and walked over to close it. That's when I noticed the small wooden stool sitting beside the door. It wasn't usually there. Melissa had moved it closer to the wall and suddenly a memory flashed through my mind. A few days earlier, I'd walked into the kitchen late at night and seen Melissa standing by the key shelf. She had jumped slightly when she noticed me. Oh, she had said quickly. I thought I heard something outside. At the time, I hadn't thought much about it. Now it felt different. Now it felt like a puzzle piece sliding slowly into place. What if the strange things around the house weren't accidents? What if someone was moving them? That thought stayed with me the rest of the evening, but proving it was another matter entirely because Melissa was careful, very careful. She never accused me directly. She only suggested. She only worried. And she always made sure Daniel was there when the evidence appeared. By the end of the week, I noticed something else that chilled me. Daniel had started locking certain cabinets. One evening, I heard the quiet click of a new lock on the garage door. When I asked him about it, he avoided my eyes. It's just for safety, he said. Safety, the same word Melissa liked to use. That night, as I lay awake listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs, a terrible realization settled over me. Melissa wasn't just making Daniel doubt me. She was slowly changing the way the entire house worked. Locks, conversations with relatives, stories about misplaced things. It was all building towards something. Something that would make everyone believe I couldn't take care of myself anymore. And if that happened, this house, my house, would no longer be mine. But Melissa had made one small mistake. She assumed I was too confused to notice, too forgetful to connect the pieces. She had no idea I was already beginning to understand what she was doing. And once that understanding settled into my bones, I started thinking about how I could prove it. The moment I truly began to suspect Melissa was deliberately setting the stage against me came on a quiet Thursday afternoon. It was raining lightly outside. The kind of steady drizzle that turns the sky pale gray and makes the whole house feel dimmer than usual. I had spent the morning reading in the living room, a blanket folded over my lap while the television murmured softly in the background. Melissa had gone out around noon, or at least that's what she said. I'm meeting a friend for lunch, she told me as she slipped on her coat. Daniel had already left for work. The moment the front door closed behind her, the house fell silent. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. Because when Melissa wasn't there, strange things didn't happen. Nothing moved, nothing vanished, Nothing reappeared in odd places. The house behaved like the house I'd lived in for 27 years. Around 2 o'clock, I decided to bake banana bread. It was an old recipe Robert loved, and sometimes the familiar rhythm of measuring flour and stirring batter helped quiet the restless thoughts that had been circling my mind lately. The kitchen filled with the warm smell of cinnamon and sugar as the bread baked in the oven. For an hour, everything felt peaceful, normal. But when the timer chimed and I opened the oven door, something happened that made my stomach twist. My phone was gone. I had left it on the kitchen counter just minutes earlier. I looked around slowly. The counter was clear. I checked the table. Nothing. The chair beside the refrigerator. Still nothing. A familiar unease crept up my spine. Melissa wasn't supposed to be home, but someone had moved my phone. I walked quietly toward the hallway. The house was silent. Too silent. Then I heard something upstairs. A faint sound. Footsteps. My heart began to pound. "Melissa?" I called. No answer. I climbed the stairs slowly, gripping the railing as I went. The hallway at the top looked empty, but the door to Melissa and Daniel's bedroom was slightly open, and I was certain it had been closed earlier. I stepped closer. The carpet muffled my footsteps as I approached the doorway. "Melissa?" Still no reply. I pushed the door open gently. The room was empty, but something was wrong. The closet door was wide open, and sitting on the dresser was my phone. I stared at it for several seconds, my mind racing. I had not brought my phone upstairs. I was absolutely certain of that. Then I heard a sound behind me, and a soft creak. I turned quickly. Melissa stood in the hallway. She looked startled to see me. "Oh," she said, placing a hand against her chest. "You scared me." My heart was still racing. "I thought you went out." "I forgot my wallet," she said casually. Her eyes moved past me into the bedroom. "Oh," she said, noticing the phone on the dresser. "You found it." "I didn't lose it." She gave a small, patient smile. "It was on the kitchen counter," she said. "I brought it up for you earlier." "That's not true." Her expression softened in that familiar, almost pitying way. "Linda," she said gently, "you probably just forgot." Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a thread finally breaking after being stretched too tight. "I did not forget," I said calmly. Melissa didn't argue. She simply nodded in that same understanding way that made my skin crawl. "Of course," she said. Then she picked up her purse from the bed and walked past me down the hallway. I stood there alone for a long moment. My phone sat on the dresser where she had placed it, not where I had left it. And suddenly I understood something very clearly. Melissa wasn't just moving things around the house, she was doing it when she knew I would notice. Then she was calmly telling everyone I had forgotten. It was deliberate, careful, almost rehearsed. By the time Daniel came home that evening, she had already told him the story. I knew because of the way he looked at me during dinner, concerned, cautious, like he was trying to avoid upsetting me. "Mom," he said halfway through the meal, "Melissa told me you got confused about your phone today." I set my fork down. I wasn't confused. Melissa glanced at him sympathetically. "She just couldn't remember bringing it upstairs," she explained softly. Daniel sighed. "Mom, it's okay." The same words again. "It's okay." I looked at him across the table and felt a deep ache in my chest because he believed her. Not completely, but enough. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The rain had stopped and the house was quiet except for the occasional creak of wood settling in the cool night air. Melissa's plan was working. Slowly, patiently. If things continued like this, Daniel and eventually everyone else would believe I couldn't take care of myself anymore. And once people believe that about you, they start making decisions on your behalf. Decisions about your home, your money, your independence. I couldn't let that happen. But arguing with Melissa clearly wasn't enough. She had already planted doubt in everyone's mind. I needed proof. Something that showed exactly what was happening inside this house when no one was watching. And as I lay there in the dark, listening to the quiet ticking of the hallway clock, An idea slowly began to take shape. A simple one, but powerful. Because if Melissa was moving things around the house to make me look unstable, then the best thing I could do was make sure someone else saw it happen. Someone who didn't rely on memory. Someone who didn't believe stories. Someone who simply recorded the truth. The next morning, I drove to the electronics store downtown, and before the week was over, I had installed security cameras throughout the house. Melissa had no idea they were there, but very soon they would show me exactly what she had been doing all along. The cameras were smaller than I expected. That was the first thing I noticed when the young man at the electronics store opened the box and showed them to me. They're motion activated, he explained, turning one in his hand so I could see the lens. You can check everything from your phone. I nodded slowly. Perfect.